Now I invite Mr. Sunil Ojha. He will share some international experience with us about the pollution control. Again, stationary sources and
I'll be talking about the mobile sources.
mobile sources. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. As everyone has been saying, it's been a heavy dose of air pollution, and I work with Ramboll, and we are. I'll just give you a brief. We are a consulting firm, and we are into various verticals. Environmental and health happens to be one of the verticals, and as such, Ramboll in India, we have like a total staff of 800, and we have been here since '97. Basically, we are, as I said, into various verticals. We have our head office is in Gurgaon, and we have offices in southern part of India, in Mumbai. We have in Hyderabad, Bangalore, and Chennai. Just going back, Ramboll, we Environ International Corporation and Ramboll, we merged, and Environ, basically the environment and health vertical is what Environ used to be, and so this is a journey for us. 1982 we were established as Environ, and in 2014 we merged with Ramboll. So it's basically we are now called as Ramboll Environ. Since we are talking about air quality here, I will talk more about what we do in terms of air quality practice. Given we have a big resource, we do high-end technical modeling work related to air quality work. I'm not we have done a lot of work in regional modeling, even going from source specific to regional scale we have done. And the biggest, I would say, on our CV is, I'm sure you might have heard about, some of you might have heard about CAMEX model. We had developed that model. It was developed in-house by Environ and now by Ramboll. We have also developed what we call the CALI mod. This is again another model which we use for calculating the emissions from various urban planning projects. This is another interesting model which we have developed, which is an extension of AirMod. It's called AirMod Co-Air, and we did it for a specific client, and this is being developed for offshore drilling in Arctic area, and that's basically AirMod cannot be applied, as you know probably. So we developed an extension of AirMod, which is called AirMod Co-Air. Here, the main reason of my talk here is to give you a brief on what we would do if you were to evaluate, say, a transportation project. If you were evaluating the same project in, say, United States, what are the various steps that we go through? And I do have some red circles here. Basically, those are circles to indicate what we are not doing here right now. As we all know, when it, for example, if you are, say, expanding that NH8 from a 4-lane to an 8-lane freeway, what would be the steps be? The first step as would be, sorry, getting used to this. The first step is emission calculation. So we need to have there are two inputs into it. One is the emission factors and one is the traffic data. So we usually go into a detailed traffic forecast, traffic survey, and do a traffic modeling. And the level of details that we get the traffic data, I know people have talked about it, is that we get the traffic data based on the vehicle type and based on various speed categories. What I saw missing here is we talk about emission factors, but we don't talk about emission factors, how they vary with the speed. If you have a freeway where the car is traveling at a speed of say 60 kilometers per hour, and when the same car is traveling at a 20 kilometers per hour, what's going to be the emission factor for that particular vehicle category? And that's the level of detail that we get. And when we model that, basically when we calculate the emissions for each traffic link we have, what are the number of automobiles we have, what number of trucks that are going on that road. Using that, we go and do what we call the emission calculation. And when we do the emission calculations, we also look at, apart from the criteria pollutants, we also look at what we call is the MSATs, which is called the mobile source air toxics, as Arumita Chaudhary was talking about, diesel particulate matter, benzene. I'll talk more about in detail. the next step is like, there's a difference between what we call as emissions and how it translates into concentration. So that's where we use the air dispersion model. You have an emission load, you model it. There are various inputs that go into this, the meteorological data, the source data, the receptor data, and that using that, you calculate what your ambient air concentrations are. And when we do that, we calculate it both for MSATs and criteria pollutants. For criteria pollutants, we just stop there, you compare it with the standards, what is your, NACS or whatever is your, California standard, or whatever standards is. But for the MSATs, we go another step, and which is translating that MSAT concentration into an actual risk number. And that's where, your health risk analysis comes into play. I know, I'll try to skip a few slides here, but this is like, everyone knows like, criteria pollutant and the MSAT. So PM10, PM2.5, I got this picture from, one of our office colleagues, and this is how, like people have talked about road dust, and we usually like in internet, it's called in-train dust. So in-train dust, as we know, like, is a factor of what we call is the self-loading and the vehicle weight. So here you see two stages of road here. This is a clean road, the self-loading is low, you cannot see like dust emissions here. And this happens to be also a paved road, but because of the self-loading, you can see the in-train dust emissions on that. And you don't see that in this in the picture, but it happens to be because of a construction truck carrying loose earth. It's gone in this direction. So that's the reason, you have like the self-loading here and the car moving here is driving that. So basically, like, as like various presenters have pointed out, in-train dust is definitely what is a big source of pollution here in Delhi. So we need to control that, the road dust. Talking about the mobile source air toxics, there have like USAP has done studies and they have identified more than 1,000 toxic chemicals. But out of that, they have zeroed in on what they call is the 7 priority MSATs, and diesel particulate matter, 1,3-butadiene, acrolein, benzene, naphthalene, POM. These are some of the toxics. These are the priority MSATs that they have said. Diesel particulate matter, everybody has been talking about the diesel particulate matter, and that happens to be like, I've pulled it out because it's perhaps the like MSAT of concern, because it's identified as a carcinogen by EPA, and as Arumita Chaudhary was mentioning, like the cancer potency factor of DPM is such that it's 10 times more potent than compared to benzene, which is being emitted by air dispersion modeling here, because it's like very, people have already got an overdose here. But I would like to point here, like how, if you were to model a similar, like, this is a stretch of road here. The picture, I hope you can see, like, there are some green dots here. So this is the road we have modeled. You have the volume sources placed on the roads, which take them and when we do the receptor modeling, we set the receptors in the various areas on the using the land use. So if it's industrial or it's a residential, you set up the receptors accordingly in a grid. Again, like there are factors which affect dispersion. People talked about odd-even rule. It's not playing a role, but again, so it was like the meteorological factors play a role. And atmospheric stability, is one of the key factors which, affects the air dispersion. And what we usually see, the atmospheric stability happens to be, it's more stable during the night hours, and that's when, the biggest, I would say, like the diesel particulate matter emitting vehicles are being allowed inside there, the trucks there. So we need to, as a policy decision, we need to also tackle that, particularly during the winter months, as you said, like you cannot really have one action for whole year. You need to take into account the meteorological conditions when you're having your policy actions. Now, this is something like which I wanted to bring up. Like we should not really stop at the criteria pollutants. We need to bring in the health risk. As Dr. D.K. Joshi was mentioning, like we need to calculate the risk. And usually, like the health risk analysis, it's like a 4-step process. step one is identifying your chemicals of concern, which for mobile source emissions we know it's the mobile source air toxics. Then we do is what we call is the exposure assessment. That's where you calculate the concentrations for these MSAT. The third and the most important step is when you do the dose response assessment. It's basically based on the exposure, duration, exposure factors. First is like you define the exposure pathways for the particular chemical. For DPM it's single inhalation, but there are other pathways like you have soil ingestion, you have dermal, you have like the water intake. So you need to define the pathways. I've already seen like the Central Pollution Control Board has started acting on the health risk assessment from the soil and groundwater side, but we need to take that step further and probably also do like on the air side. Like you take the air, concentration of the toxics and you start calculating the health risk based on the calculation. And step 4 is the risk characterization. So apart from inbuilt concentrations of criteria pollutants, we also start to build the health risk estimate, and that's what we do as a regulator in US. The concentration of criteria pollutants is one. They lay more emphasis on the health risk numbers. At the end of the project analysis, they want to see what's the cancer risk your project is going to generate. What's going to be the acute hazard index? Basically, the health risk, they define it into 3 parameters. One is the cancer risk, the other is acute, and the chronic. Acute is like a short-term exposure to different pollutants, and for cancer and chronic are long-term. For chronic and acute, EPA has developed. There are different bodies who have developed different exposure limits. So basically, like the cancer risk and the acute and chronic hazard indices need to be calculated. I think probably that was it from my side. So basically, thank you.